Welcome, everyone. Good morning from Boston. Last evening, we had a private reception for the joint exhibitions of Hideaki Miyamura and Tony King. And it was one of the most, I don't know a better word than robust gatherings of people of goodwill and good spirit. Many people had come from Worcester and some even from Canada to celebrate art. And it's such a luxury and such an amazing blessing to be able to come together just around works of beauty and works of meaning. These two shows, I think, give a wonderful opportunity for anyone who has the time, either online or to visit the works. And in addition, Ian, who's worked with the gallery for many years, did a really superb installation, creating little duets between the works on the wall and the beautiful vases of Hideaki Miyamura. Today, the intention is to share with you some of the works of Tony King and many of the memories that Tony's work and Tony himself has left with all of us. So I wanted to start with a quote from Brother Thomas. The only authentic path we must follow is the one we find within. And of all the artists that we've worked with over the years, it seems to me that that is an incredible description of Tony King. We're delighted to have his son Bruce here with us. And Bruce, I'd like you to begin just speaking a bit about that quote, your father, and the cover of the catalog with the title, A Singular Journey, which and the image of Sweet Pea. So Bruce?
Tony's youngest child, Bruce, and I'm really grateful to be here to help honor his legacy, his singular journey. And as you have mentioned, Brother Thomas's quote about authenticity and memory being more permanent than matter, I look to my father's photographs as very powerful memory. With me, it grows in intensity. I think of a photograph he took of the shimmering insects when they were hatching in the summer sun, just an instant, and they created a little tower. And he took that picture, and I think it's in one of his look around books. And I see his work as that shimmering tower of photographs that's here to share with us what he saw. He was ambitious, he was athletic, and he was really turned on with his mechanism as a camera. And this picture of Sweet Pea is a culmination of many years living around this very boat that was built by a neighbor who carved whales and taught children and adults how to carve. And he lived near this, and he moored it in different locations, but it never had the beauty that this picture represents, let me tell you. This river comes in like a path of Mercury almost, with all the colors. As a painter, which is what I am, I just couldn't do justice with this as a painting. It's a photograph. It's a perfect, I don't want to use the word perfect, but it's an epitome of the sea, the earth, and man's relation to it in the shape of this humble craft. Oh, is that enough for starters?
It's a good starter. Let's look at the entire image. And Mara, I ask you to look at it as a work of art and as an expression of the maker's soul.
What I love about Tony King's work is this perfect tension between stasis and movement. And it's in every single one. Sometimes movement is ascendant, sometimes stillness is ascendant. But in every single one of them, there's usually both components. So you've got the movement, the ripple along the shore line and the movement of these arcs. And then you've just got the stillness of the boat in the water. Just, and it's also a tension between breath and release. Like there's this movement of air into your lungs, and there's that pause right before you exhale. And I always feel like Tony's work is right in that pause of a breath. And breath is life. So I think you come full circle back to what Bruce was just saying about Tony.
Absolutely beautiful. Rusty?
Well, it's just one of many wonderful photographs that Tony produced with incredible skill. I mean, the things that go into this photograph begin with light and what time of day this was shot, such that the light produces an image like this. You couldn't do this at high noon, for instance, and Tony knew that. And then it's this combination. I think Mara's right on it with this concept. We're going to see some incredible motion and then this incredible stillness. And all of it somehow transmits a sense of humanity. It's sort of wonderful. The whales on the side of this little boat that reflect in the water are little waves, but they're not waves. They're the boat. And there's this, then there's the line where you can see underneath the water. And so you have water, air, land, all these elements that always combine to make one feel you're a part of the world. And if Tony did anything, he always made all of us who engaged his work feel a part of that world he was giving us.
And Caroline from the South and University of Missouri?
Well, I think what marks a good photographer is not someone who captures something that's just overtly beautiful, something that's I guess I'd call it sensationalism. It's like, oh, that's just, that grabs me in kind of a more in your face kind of way. These are more moments in between that he sees and captures that you wouldn't necessarily take the time to stop and appreciate the way you should. So he captures that, like Mara was saying, like in between a breath, and you get to enjoy something that's a lot more peaceful, a lot more deeply beautiful than something that's not as truly peaceful.
Interesting. So the name Sweet Pea is one of the probably 2,000 nicknames I have for Sue Pucker. And so every time I see this, it makes me smile. But it also makes me smile because of the composition. And not only the reflection, but the ins and outs, the triangles, the sense of that moment, which Tony has captured and then been able to share with us, and then to bring back all of the memories of the years that we worked together is a real gift. If we can look at the next piece. So Thomas wrote, each day is filled with continued discovery and goodness. And think about the singularity of Sweet Pea and then the vision of these boats across essentially a seascape. Mara, I'd love for you to respond to it and just help us through it.
Well, I'm always fascinated by how an artist knits an image together, which a multiple exposure basically does, and how seamlessly he does it. I just, I always try and figure out the repeating pattern in the image, but in his case, the foreground shift is remarkably interesting to me, because I know I'm not seeing an image that is real. It's a composite image. And so you've got this sort of durational time aspect in it. But it seems like it's a different landscape in each one because of the foreground. The background, you kind of know what's going on, but the foreground seems at one. So I can't quite figure out how the image was made in my head.
Right.
Just got, which is fascinating to me. And the other thing that relates to something that Rusty said, and I guess it's what we were all saying, is the ability for Tony to first arrest your attention, not like have a big ta-da moment and that's it, but arrest your attention and focus your looking so that you spend time with an image. Now this image I'm willing to spend time with, and it's about time as well. But it's an invitation for close looking. It's an invitation for a richer and richer, more fulfilling aesthetic experience. And there's a generosity in that as an artist that I find very compelling.
It's a very lovely tribute. Rusty, any clue how this was done?
Well, it's just a multiple image synthesis. I don't know whether he took individuals and at printing did it, which is the most likely thing given the length of it. One could think about doing multiple shots on a single image. It's all done, with a digital camera, but I suspect it's three that got synthesized together. And it's part of it is simply skill. I mean, I don't ever want to diminish how difficult these things are to put together. It looks so wonderful and so like, oh, I could do that. You can't do that. It's just not that
Yeah.
easy.
Right.
And then more importantly, it's a wonderful, and Mara said this, it's a visualization of time. It's watching something happen over time in that wonderful space that we've talked about that he creates. And I think the foreground, as Maura mentioned, it's a progressive one, right? You progress from a little bit to a little bit more to a little bit more. So the foreground complements the sail and the relationship to the rising sun as this measures of time because you're in a different place or you're looking at something different. So it's just fabulous. I mean, it's not just about a boat moving, it's about creating an image that gives you this sense of time passing. It's fabulous.
It's what art occasionally can be about at its best. Bruce, any sense of the place that we're looking at in these different versions?
This is very much his home territory. With the islands, you can just see the tail end of a lighthouse off the right island. And this is where his consciousness as a photographer, his duty to take a picture, he was dutiful in that this is a very exciting moment, and he saw the possibility, and he went for it. And it does represent a lot of skill. And this was his home, and he had this tenant that the light doesn't wait around for us. The light is an invitation to activity, and that lobsterman is in the peak of his activity in his home, and the light's shining on him, and it shines on all of us. And so I just think this picture represents all of that. It's just a moment in the sun.
You
Right.
realize that that boat is moving not super fast, but not slowly either. So being ready and able to capture that does require some real thought. The sun's no different. It's about at the same level. So these boats are going by, I mean, this boat is going by in multiple frames fairly quickly. And to capture it as he did with the symmetry that he did, it's pretty phenomenal.
My recollection is that there was someone who sort of guided the boat, so he was free to take the pictures. And I remember him talking about getting up in the middle of the night or early morning to meet this person and just go out and then be prepared to capture a moment with the full awareness. So it's even, I think, more difficult than fishing, where you don't know if you're going to get anything. And then to have found this and then been able to share it in such a beautiful way is extremely, extremely meaningful. Place is an important part of Tony's world. I remember vividly trying to convince him to join us on one of our trips to Japan. And essentially, he said that there are my places that I go to, and new places are not what I'm looking for. So the next image, if we can look at it, is certainly a different place. And Caroline?
Oh yeah, I mean, I have an affinity for horses, to say the least. I love them. I love the title of this one too. He points out that dappled gray horse right in the center, who is definitely looking at him. Its ear is pointed right at Tony taking that photograph. And the way that that texture with the dust coming down, the light coming through the angel rays, and then the intensity of the detail of the horse's fur and their movement like a wave coming down. I mean, I love it for multiple reasons.
Mark, could you talk a bit about light and atmosphere in this piece?
Well, this, I mean, clearly the vantage point allows the horses to come streaming down this small hill or this canyon-like place with the sagebrush in it. But everything about this piece reminds me of, the Asian use of atmospheric perspective, where again, that the angel light and the dust are creating the distance, as opposed to a one point or perspective shot that that in Western art you might find. But this beautiful raking light, the movement of the animals coming down and around, there's something very cinematic about this as well. So it has this slightly Asian atmospheric perspective quality, but to me, it's really a cinematic quality. It's this dramatic moment of movement of horses. We don't know what it portends. We don't know what started them moving this quickly. We don't know what they're pulsing forward to. But it's given, again, a moment in time, the speed of the horses, the dust and the air and the light are all captured. But the why or the where of what these horses are doing and the why or the where of how he's able to stand and not get trampled as an artist
Right.
has this very cinematic drama to it.
There's also this kind of rhythm of dark light, as you move into the piece all the way to the back. And there's a visual rhythm that gives you, or at least me, the sense that I'm there. Thank goodness I'm not. But in any event, the energy that is exuded by these animals moving toward us with such power. And again, I always have to go back and remind myself, this is a photograph. And it has captured a moment in time that Tony wanted us to share as well. So it's with great delight that we look at the next piece, which is among my favorite images over many, many years. And Rusty, your thoughts?
Well, what I would say about this and the previous photograph is that these are photographs of motion, and they contrasts in very significant ways from the quiet presentation that we'll see in, well, for Sweet Pea, but now we're going to see more in some of Tony's photographs. So here's the sort of opposite of stillness, and yet even with this and the marching, the running of the horses and the whys and the wherefores, there's a peacefulness about it. It's probably the Asian feeling that Mara talked about as those horses come down that slope. But with the dust and with the light, there's a sense, and as we look at this photograph, a beautiful, animal. I mean, just amazing animal caught mid-stride, hair flowing, mane flowing, the essence of motion. There's a peacefulness to it. There's a sense that this is a wonderful thing. There's not a sense of fear. There's not a sense of running from something. It's captured in a way that sort of says, this is what these animals are capable of in the beauty of nature. And so even in something that you would think, this is a stampede or all these great animals, there's an incredible peacefulness for me in how he presents them.
I would just also point out the negative space in the lower right-hand corner, where there's this kind of vignette of movement and the legs of some of the horses, and then the background, this kind of silhouette, ghost-like tree that frames the movement and the rhythm of the horses themselves. Bruce, comments about where these were taken, your memories, if you were with your dad, or things that he told you about them.
Well, he loved to get into the action of the corral and the wrangle. And these were early morning wrangles where the horses were coming back to their duties. And there's a little bit of shyness, but also a peacefulness because it's part of their routine. And my dad loved to get in the way of that. I remember as a child worrying that he was going to get in the way of the wranglers' routines, but he would climb up on the rooftop and take pictures of the horses in action, and he'd position himself off his own horse to be in the path of this activity. And he wanted to, in the sense you feel the wind of the horse and all that, the dust. You can even, when I come up to these photographs, like to sense and feel the shudder of the hoofs on the paths and the boulders as they go by. Yeah.
And were these specific places like in Arizona, Wyoming, that he
Yes.
would go back to?
This would have been in outside of Tucson, Arizona, that he would frequent. Yeah.
Because there were specific places, if I remember correctly, that he would go back to over and over again. Again, because they were his, in the sense that he was comfortable there, and it was as if it were his ranch, his home, his place, his horses. And that comfort enabled him to be even more intimate with the subjects as he did produce these photographs.
Yes, and he'd talk about just like being an insect in the grass, and feeling this wind of the horse come by.
Mhm.
And so very much an invitation to be in the light and the activity with his camera.
Just wanted to also mention that this is one of the larger prints in the show, so that you'll go from 4 by 6 inches to this, which is 20 by 30. So not only do the animals in this particular piece have a monumentality to them, the photograph in the context of the rest of the show also has a stature and monumentality to it. Next slide, please. Mara, this is a very different space and different place, giving a specific message to different people. Each time someone has seen it in a different way, the interpretation is pretty amazing. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about it, and maybe then ask Bruce to tell us where we really are.
Well,
Well,
this is one of those ones, there's no date that I know of. I mean, I'm walking into a gallery, I don't know the work. It's clearly a historic moment. I mean, it's a very 1940s movie poster, movie star kind of painted mural on a wall. Those don't really exist that much anymore unless they've been preserved. Even the outfit that this woman is wearing, it's at least the 1980s, it may be earlier. Why is this something from the 40s to the 60s with this woman who I don't happen to know this advert or this historic person? Highland and West, obviously, she's coming up to a street corner. She's walking in the shadow on a very, very, very hot day, the glare, or at high noon. You know how if you're in a city, you move to where the shadows are. And in the wintertime, when it's 20 degrees, you move to where the sun is.
Right.
She's clearly moved into the shadows and is walking at Highland and West. So for me, this piece is an enigma, except for the fact that it's a symphony in black, white, and gray. It's got a graphic quality because of the heat of the sun and the deepness of the shadow, the darkness of the wall. His tie seems to come over this circular form, this cameo that he's put into, and everything in this picture is dramatic shifts of black, white, and gray, mid-range. So there's a formal quality to the work. There's an icon like you expect this is the portrait of Ruby Dee walking past her wall. But I don't know the image. I don't know who this woman is, and I don't know what the image above her is. So it's a big question mark, which is fascinating to me. So I think Bruce has to tell us more about the year and the place.
Well, this would have been one of his early photographs in Worcester when he was operating the Washburn Garfield Company. So I'm thinking it's the 70s, late 70s. I think,
And the image itself, is it somehow someone said it was related to a store owned by Newbury Street shop owner named Alan Bazarian. And this was on the side of his building as I understood it, but I'm not sure. No one has ever, I've never asked him.
yes, well, this building right now is, this wall is bright, bright yellow right now in Worcester. So
See,
still there, and I can't give you the specifics.
okay.
But
And
this, but
we're
this,
free to respond to it as art.
oh, 1,000 words can't complete this job on this picture. It's just wonderful. So glad he took it. It's almost like he didn't, he just was alert and prescient for that moment. Says everything. It's opposites. As you say, it's dramatic. It's an enigma. It's a symphony in black and white. A moment.
Rusty, your thoughts?
I have a number of thoughts. Number one, this is a street photograph. Street photographers sometimes set up and just wait for the right moment. But there is a spontaneity of it that is a little different than a lot of the photographs we'll see of Tony. So it's an interesting, you don't think of Tony as a street photographer. But again, when he finishes his image, it becomes a Tony King image. The other thing is, just to enlarge on what Mara said about black and white, this is a black woman with white hair, a white skirt, uh, walking proud, maybe, whatever. But the contrast is this domineering white man with black hair above him, above her, and there's a sense of um, lack of equality. I mean, there's a social justice element to this that I think Tony felt. I mean, I don't think it was just pure chance. Well, I mean, certainly taking the photograph is, but I think what he saw in this, what other people might see in it, is an element of the racial inequality and the dimensions of this, the attitudes of the two individuals certainly make us think about that. So it's this wonderful black and white, right? Okay, that's part of the issue. There are the grays in between for making the photograph, but I think it's a part of who Tony was, and Bruce, you can speak to that. But I think there's a sense of that he always had of treating all people the same.
Very nicely said. And Caroline, from a different view for sure.
Well, I certainly see a very unreal man, but no one looks that good. Maybe on their wedding day, maybe at best, and then a very real person, and the stillness of the he's almost an icon because he's so unreal of a man, and he's stagnant. Probably the most active is the light that's cast on his face by the person who has painted it, and then the woman who's in motion and moving. I think that's a really interesting play between what's unreal and what is real.
A nice perspective as well. Just another brief quote, and then to also emphasize that there is a very intimate family side to Tony's universe, children, schools, places, and his own kids as they grew up were part of his visual vocabulary. And so there's an intimacy that comes in the next photograph that we're going to look at. Please. And with it, this quote that art is something seen about something unseen. And I certainly feel that the response to the previous photograph was a wonderful example of each of us coming to that photograph of the man and the woman and the lights and darks in it with our own portfolio of ideas and feelings and commitments. So, Bruce, I'd love for you to respond to this and tell us what your feelings are.
Um, well, it's an uncomfortable photograph to look at when I was younger because it's so stark and alone and isolated. And it's me sitting there in many different ways. And it's also empathetic and sympathy towards anyone in that situation with the adventure they're about to face, where everything is bigger than life for them. And it's awesome. And it's a portrayal of humanity as the child, which is the tender-minded. And it's a very, it's a old photograph too, 70s.
Well, you gotta be careful because I was born long before that, so don't make it too old.
Okay.
All right. Mara, how do you respond to it, both in terms of the mood, the feeling, and then the composition?
It's one of those things that my first response as somebody who was one of those kids who at 3 years old was put into a ballet class with Miss Beverly Ann, that you're there and you're waiting and you're really scared on your first class. And so there's so the first child to arrive for a ballet class is like at the first look, but then just how curled up this child is in the beginning, that fetal kind of pulling together of the chest, and how big this room looks against this child. I mean, if the child had been standing up, it would still look big, but with having the child diminished into this ball on the floor in a corner with this very directional kick plate or kick wall, whatever those, the dark plastic rim around the room, and then caught between the door and the shallow diagonal of the ballet bar itself. That moment in childhood where in the beginning and you're facing a world, the world is so much larger than you are. I think it just sort of captures that mystery of how a child must be interacting with something so much bigger than they are. But the other thing I love is that this painting is so oddly asymmetrical in every aspect. The weird things on the wall, the slight striping of kind of a board and batten, where the rhythm structure of the rail, and the child pushed way into the corner against a door, pushed way into the corner. Everything about this painting is off somehow in terms of its formal qualities, which makes it perfect in terms of its psychological qualities.
That's a wonderful perception. Rusty, your thoughts?
I would simply echo pretty much what Mara said. I think this is a photograph which gives the viewer the opportunity to have the emotion of the child. I mean, what he's done here is present the child in such a way that you have the same, or are able to have the same feeling that child might have. And it is all the characteristics that Mara has pointed out in this room. Placement of the child is not in the middle. It's off to the side with the door off to the side. All of that has purposely been constructed or in the printing of this to augment the sense of being small in a large world. And I think Tony captured it. We'll see another photograph in a minute of how Tony captures what it is like to be that person or to be that individual, and gives you the opportunity to share the emotion.
Caroline, your thoughts?
It's a very empathetic photograph. I think the his view of the child almost looks like to me, I read it's like the end of the class and maybe that one's done, or maybe they were acting up and the teacher said, go and sit by the door and go wait. And they're there twiddling their feet and just in deep thought. I think we discredit children sometimes how much they are thinking, because I remember being young and you are overwhelmed by the world, but you're like, I have so much I'm thinking of and feeling, and adults, I think they forget how quick you grow up. And I think Tony can really see and empathize with this child, how uncomfortable they are, and deep reflecting thought. I don't think that child's just thinking of nothing. It's a very intense photograph in that way, and I love it.
What a lovely response to any work of art that engages you to the extent that you're able to project into it who you are and what you are, and at the same time appreciate it as a work of art. So I love that aspect of what Tony's work invites and allows us to do. So let's look at the next piece. Mara, your thoughts?
It's so almost timeless for me. You know, that it's an old-fashioned style of jeans. It's a you know, a wall that a kid has painted a square on, or his father's painted a rectangle that is the box, you know, where the hitting, what is it called? The hitting zone. But the fact that we have the pursuit of craft, the pitching craft in this case, for a very young, you know, boy, this is no more than 12, 13-year-old, you know, in the backyard, has set himself up for pitch after pitch after pitch to hone his craft. That gangly quality of an 11 to 14-year-old child. And because it is in this wonderful grayscale against a, you know, barn gray dirt lot, you know, I would probably guess that this is a 1970s picture, but it could be a Dust Bowl era picture, and it could be somebody in a field in Vermont today, actually. But that pursuit and that energy and that release right as the ball leaves your hand, the full follow through. So the arm has swept down as the ball has tried to hit its mark. It's about childhood. It's about timelessness. It's about the the great American pastime, and it is, you know, just this wonderful symphony of grayscale.
Bruce, any memories of what this is, or who it is, or what do you know about the photograph itself?
I don't believe my father knew who the boy was.
Mm-hmm.
Spent a lot of time around farms and farm activity. And this is an exquisite capture entitled Follow Through, which is the biggest task on earth that one faces, which is in expressing, you know, what and how we care about things. We hope we can follow through with them. So here we have the kid with tremendous focus, attention, purpose, ambition, aggression, spirit, and confidence. And where else would I want that ball to drop? It's in the perfect location. I can hear it hitting the barn boards. And there's hope in this image that I can follow through. We can follow through. And I just love this image so much.
Rusty, a little bit about the composition, the wall, the windows, the design for the ball to throw into the strike zone. Your thoughts?
Well, you just said it all.
I see. I
No,
apologize.
it is. I was going to mention that. I think the geometry of the windows, the strike zone is what it's called. It's painted there. The sign that's on there. I mean, obviously, Tony had nothing to do with those getting placed, but he did have everything to do with framing that picture. And once again, the motion. This is not somebody standing there holding a ball or something. This is a in motion picture that captures the body so that you can get complete view of the strike zone painted on the barn, all the windows, all the squares, rectangles, and then the beauty of rusted nails, which I just love. I love to see that dripping down. But the other thing I would say is, again, the magic of Tony is this is a motion picture that's captured. This is horses. The little child sitting there was Sweet Pea. Everything's quiet. It's settled. Here, there's motion. This is right in the middle of this kid throwing it, and you do get that sense of I want to hit that spot. I'm going to really work for it. And fortunately, as he captured this, he did. But you can remember playing these games. You know, there were kids did marvel. You give them a stick or a ball or something, and suddenly they figure out a way to play a game, and that's what's captured both the youth of this individual. You know, the desire to have a goal, which is as simple as throwing a ball in a rectangle, captured in mid motion with a sense of peace.
Lovely. One of the quotes of Thomas's that I think applies to many of the pieces, particularly some of the earlier ones, but also this. My guess is that this is not the only image he took. He may have taken some before and some after. I remember with Paul Caponegro, he would generally frame it with 6 different exposures. But Thomas wrote, waiting is certainly an unsung part of the creative process. Perhaps it is part of life as well. And that notion of getting the right moment, capturing it, and then identifying it and then sharing it is what he has done with this. I love particularly Rust. In addition, the rust of the nails creating these lines of real movement on the wall itself in quite an extraordinary manner. Let's look at the next piece, please.
Mhm.
And here we're in another part of Tony's singular journey. And I do want to emphasize as we go through that one of the most important parts of Tony is the range of his interests. There are certain artists that we have worked with over a period of time who become masters of still life, or masters of trees, or branches, or light. Tony allowed himself the opportunity to explore those things which excited him in a very gentle and a very determined way. And now here we are with the frogs. So I'm going to ask you, Mara, if you don't mind talking a bit about frogs.
Okay, well, frogs are a favorite thing of mine because they were a favorite thing of my daddy's. So I see a frog, I think of my daddy. And it turns out that lots of daddies collect frogs. Because my best friend, who grew up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, not Dorchester and Osterville, her father had a thing for frogs, pictures of frogs, just like frogs. And what I think is, I mean, first off, Tony's attention as attention. Attention to subject, attention to place, attention to light, attention to craft, attention to, just laser focused attention on something. But in these two, because they're juxtaposed, I just want to talk to them as juxtaposed images, is its attention to texture and attention to light. Where in the tree frog, it's the texture, how the frog is blending into those rocks, the chunkiness, the rawness, the hardness of the image, even though the frog is, of course, soft because it's an organic breathing thing. There's a hardness, the way his body is shaped with that angular triangle in the center, with the limbs all around it, and the chunkiness of where the stone is placed, how microscopically he got in there to frame all these textures and to even out the light. The light is very even in this one. Now you come to the next one. The frog is a bullfrog, and the frog's in water, and the frog is a wet-skinned frog as opposed to a dry-skinned frog. And there's almost a sense of iridescence, of fluorescence, but I think it's just how the light was actually striking the frog and the edge of the rock, by how the sunlight just happened to be at that second that he clicked the shutter, that gives this sort of electric frisson across a wet body, a wet surface, and where the wet meets the rock, that make two portraits of two frogs so radically different.
Indeed, indeed. One of the things that Thomas wrote, which I love, is you have to respond to the current that passes through you and hope that you catch it. And it was sort of marvelous to see how he caught these two different frogs in such different ways. And Rusty, I thank you for juxtaposing them for the conversation. And now invite your comments.
Well, I think Mara has shown us exactly the difference in these two photographs for textures, coloration, etc. But I think just the comment that Tony knew his subjects. Tony loved the outdoors. He has marvelous pictures of birds, marvelous pictures of reptiles, amphibians. I mean, and he knew them. I mean, he spent time uh, in their places. He would go there. He would go to Florida, and he would go places. And so what he's able to do to a great extent is to show you these creatures in their habitat, whatever they may be, in all their different forms, all their different glorious forms in a way. And he's only able to do that because he actually knows his subject really well. And it's just, you know, whether it's horses or children or now animals, amphibians, etc. The reason Tony didn't just go new places is because he went places where he knew his subjects, and he wanted to make pictures of the essence of those creatures, wherever they may be. And this is just a wonderful example. If you wanted to show the essence of a bullfrog in water, what more beautiful way than what we see here?
I think it's a very helpful thing. And it's also relevant to the notion of what these conversations need to be about, which is both looking and seeing. So the goal is, from my perspective, to enable us to better see from within where the artist is coming from and take away from that something that enriches our existence. If we can look at the next slide, please. Caroline, I'm just going to ask you, if you don't mind, to respond to this, and then Bruce, if you can give us a sense of place.
I think this has a really similar, it has a similar sense to the dappled gray, where the horses are coming down in a river down the hill. There's this great eerie depth, and then the forefront characters are so poignant. It is just, it's trees. It looks like, I mean, a graveyard with the fence, but they are so acute in contrast to that depth, that beautiful depth. And I guess it looks like a fog out there across the field. That play between the depth and the intensity up front gives a life to the trees and to the forefront that wouldn't exist otherwise. And he's really good at capturing that and telling a story. Yeah, that's what really stands out to me.
Mara, before Bruce, sorry.
Well, it's this huge field. I'm assuming that the trees and the graveyard are up on a hill, because in ancient burial grounds, you buried at the top of the hill because the water was pooling and in your water at the bottom of the hill. So you don't pollute your water source. But what it is this, it's an enormous field. It is cultivated. If you really look through the veils of it, so there are people that are implied. There's land cultivation that is implied. But what I take away from this is somebody 100 years ago, 150 years ago, whatever the family is that works this place, that works this land, have buried their people here, have planted trees in an agricultural area as monuments to their dead, markers to their dead or the stones, and put a fence so that if a group of wild horses were being run through these fields, or if there was a wild animal in these fields, the resting place of their people, a lineage of people, is marked. That we mark that moment, and that generations mark those moments, and how tied to the land people are in a farming family, the kind of idea of the sense of place that is so important to all of us. Even if we've never owned a place, if we were born by the sea is our sense of place. If we were born in the mountain is our sense of place. And what Bruce has told us several times today is his father had places, and it is so clear to me that he's memorializing a sense of place that has been marked by others and other generations in this place.
Bruce, your thoughts?
This is right alongside a farm on a back road in Maine. And there are sheep that wander around here, and there's ponds, and this drifts out to the marshland and to the ocean. So there's a sense of sacredness about it and remove that makes you comfortable at a distance. And the simplicity of the subject is enchanting. So it's an enchanting little view alongside the road that, again, like Sweet Pea, is in its moment right now. I've never seen it or been able to pay attention to this scene in the way that he has captured it here. So it's
Thank
in
you. Go ahead.
It's in Maine.
I was just thinking that one of the things that art can and should do is to remind us of the preciousness of life, and in doing that, also honoring death. And so that this space, this place, becomes a sanctuary in a particular way. And then to have the clouds and the background, the fog lifting and so forth, places it for me actually in an Asian environment, not Maine, because of all the marvelous scrolls that both the Japanese and Chinese did. And there's a quietness to it that is very inviting. And finally, I'd point out that I think the image is like 4 by 5 inches or 4 by 6 inches.
Yeah, I was just going to point that out, that
Yeah,
this, I would have thought this was a much larger
right.
image. It's got a big horizontal, where I think of Asian as scrolls this way, although there are plenty of scrolls that you read in, scroll in, read, scroll. But there's a monumentality to this piece that
Right.
when you were speaking, I glanced over at the size and I thought, how can that be a 4 by 6 image that feels like it's enormous?
It's interesting. We've lived with one of the prints of this for many, many years, and Mara, it always brings me great delight to feel so much space and holiness in a way in such a small format.
So,
Let's look
Brody,
at the next. Go ahead.
before you go, there are a number of photographers, Michael Kenna being one, Hiromi's a Japanese photographer, who capture clouds, various degrees of light in layered effect. And Tony's done that beautifully here. It's not the simplest thing in the world to make this work, to have your foreground be dominant while you're capturing or maintaining the beauty of that ethereal background. So very nicely done. I always remember, if you're looking at a cemetery, the concept of rest in peace, and that sort of comes to me as you look at this, rest in peace. But the other thing, just as a sort of, I don't know, it's like a Sambach humor in one of his paintings. The three trees here, they're all different. They're all one very formed and almost trimmed, and two others, but very different. And just I look at it and think, yeah, people are different. People in that cemetery are all different people. Three different trees, and he didn't plan them. It wasn't that, but capturing it this way, it's an interesting contrast to the etherealness of the background.
Absolutely wonderful perceptions as well. Thomas wrote, art transcends the limitation of time and time's concerns. And I would argue that really good art, as the next image we're going to be looking at, also, for me, captures a notion of the passage of time and the passage of life. So Mara, if you would start us off on the rig.
Well, here he has wandered into an old barn carriage house storage space in some rural property, and someone has kept their buggy, cared to put a dust sheet over it, so it's over however many years that it's been sitting there, and however much dust is on that dust sheet, it has been cared for a certain way. The interior has been whitewashed or limed in a certain way. So it's an old property, an uninsulated property. We don't know what's outside. It could be a snowstorm, it could be dusk, it could just be that the windows have so much dust on it that the light has been diffused. We don't know what time of day it is. We don't know what year it is. That's that timeless quality. But there's also, as humble a space as this is, as humble an object or non-utilitarian at this point that this object is, it is still cared for. There's something very cared for about both this structure and this rig. And then Tony has further cared for it and preserving it and moving it into that contemplative space for us to care for.
Beautifully said. Bruce?
Wow. Thank you for letting me speak on this one. Am I on mute? No, I'm unmuted. Okay. I like the fact that you mentioned holiness a minute ago. This picture was taken outside a barn that was emblazoned with a board that said this on it in very clear writing: "Speak to the earth and it shall teach thee." Two humble-looking gentlemen, a son and a father, standing in front of the barn, in which the doors are slightly cracked. And you go into that barn, and this is where he found this picture. And I found this in a drawer where we have stacked these images. We have many of these images. And he refers to a passage from which that was taken, which is Job 12:8. And in Job 12:8, it talks about how the animals will teach you, the birds will tell you, speak to the earth and it will teach you, and the fish of the sea will inform you. So here I see him coming upon a photograph that is a feast for him, which is what he did with his camera. He spoke to the earth. He listened to the birds. And he was informed by all the things that he photographed. And this is a historical moment of an old buggy. So I just love it. It's so simple.
And Caroline, your thoughts?
Well, the way he's framed it and the way he's photographed it and worked with it, probably some after the fact, it brings again a story to the centerpiece. It almost looks like, to me, the buggy's looking out the window like, oh, I just so want to be, used. But I bet if you were in that barn, it wouldn't be the same. You wouldn't he brings that piece to life through his eyes, through the camera, in a way that you wouldn't just experience if maybe you walked by it or you were in that building. It comes to life in a totally different way. And then of course it being black and white adds even more depth to that as well. And he's just really good at bringing to life these objects and to say something that he's experiencing.
I would also just like to point out simply the composition with the two windows, one on either side, rectangles with squares within them, and those are sources of light. And then the sheet covering the object also gives you illumination. Wonderful sense of that wheel as it is basically situated in such a glorious, glorious way that it's a work of art in this very subtle way that enables the rig and the feelings and the moods that all of us have talked about the quality of life and the passage of time, the desire to get outside, as Carolyn said, and to be used. All those things are simply stated, and then we bring that to the image, and it comes alive in a very special way. Next slide, please.
Bernie, before
Sorry.
you go, there's a real dignity to this
Yeah.
photograph. This is something older with great dignity, and all the geometry that he saw. Again, Tony didn't build this building, but he saw it. He saw the boards and the angles. He saw all that was there, and the cleanliness of it in a way. But it really adds this real sense of dignity to something that's older. And I would also throw out potentially there's almost an anthropomorphism of this carriage. it almost has a shroud over it, or there's almost elbows there. So there's almost an element of the human, which adds to the perception of this as with dignity.
Thank you for reminding us of that. And the next slide then, which is again a somewhat vacant space, this without a single object in it, but a creation of rhythms of lights and darks moving down this lighthouse hallway. Mara?
The perspective on this one, shooting us back down this corridor that's leading us to probably a staircase to go up, or a staircase to go down, because I'm not sure where we are in the lighthouse. Well, actually, Tony had a background on when he first came in, and I said, oh, it's Carl Sagan, because it had all these light streaks, how light is captured at speed. And so all of these scatterboard planks that this lighthouse is made from, shooting back and shooting it, down the ceiling going down, and the things going back, and the perspective being so forced on this piece, kind of like thinking about how a Fresnel lens works and sends out its light. There's sort of an analogy there somehow, for me, from somebody who worked in the theater where Fresnel lenses were used quite a bit in my generation, and how hot the light is coming in from likely the south. If he was up in Maine, the light's coming from the south, or it's the west at the end of the day. It's one or the other. And how these little frills of these like cafe curtains are captured 3 in a row, almost like they were lampshades at that particular moment. The cornicing, so all the history of this building, the scattered planks, the cornicing, the cafe, the 3/3s or 4/4 windows. Well, let's see what it is. It's 1, 2, 3. They're 3/3s. All the angles that the light is producing in here. So here he walks into a space with an art form that is all about capturing light through a lens and imprinting it on a piece of film, or digital later in life, but a piece of film probably in this case, and then printing light out again. This is a piece which is, it is capturing a lighthouse keeper's walk. There's, sort of no about it, but it has a meta level for me about how Tony is capturing light in his camera lens and letting it spill back out again. So it exists on lots of levels, the formal levels, the conceptual level, the meta level, the real-time level. And I don't know, it's seemingly a still moment in time, but the way those light patterns go down the hall, it is just all about motion for me.
Lovely. Caroline?
Well, it's interesting how geometry and these straight lines and the square framing of the piece itself is used almost to point out what's not straight about the piece. When I see it, I mean, it's kind of curving around. I mean, this building must be pretty old, and I mean, it's probably seen a lot if it's a lighthouse. It's kind of tilted to the side, and I think that's where the motion, not only through repetition, like Mara was saying too, but I mean, everything's just slightly wonky there. I can't help but start to contemplate what he was thinking here. It is an in-between moment. There's nothing to do in this hallway but walk through it to your next destination. It's interesting that there's these stark pieces of light, as Mara pointed out, in between each one. It almost is like I guess it could be almost like a analogy for moments in time. You look out the window and there's something else, you walk on to the next. And that's how we repeat through life, is these kind of inconsistent moments is kind of what I'm seeing in this.
Lovely. Bruce?
This is a photograph from the early 70s. We spent one night in this lighthouse during a thunderstorm. And so when you say memory carries more than matter, this has a lot of memories to it. I think of, throwing a Super Bowl down this corridor, or bowling or roller skates. There's a stillness and an architectural peculiarity to this that means a lot to people because it was washed out by the ocean. This was destroyed by the ocean and rebuilt in a way that the ocean can be put back to shape. It's on pontoons now. But this picture means a lot to people who knew what it was. It brings tears to their eyes. This was just a inspired moment. That's all I got on this one.
Where is this light? Where is it?
This is Goat Island Light in Kennebunkport, Maine.
Okay.
And now we're at the last image, which really is just another of the images to alert each one of us to the importance of spending time with images. So Rusty, I'd love for you to comment on Crystal Forest.
Well, I think one can take the last photograph and move to this photograph and say, this is about seeing. Whether you talk about Thomas's looking and seeing, Tony saw. I mean, again, that hallway with the way it had both motion and direction was all created by how it was built, but it was not captured until Tony captured it and gave it to us. And the only way he can do that is by being able to see it. And then we can see it too, by his ability to do that. And this is very much an example of that as well. This is those who live in the Northeast see crystal windows, especially nowadays, right now when it's very, very cold outside. These patterns form on windows based on ice and crystal formation. And they look like a whole series of ferns or other plants, if you will, just, incredibly complex and beautiful and serene. And again, it is the eye. It's two things. One, it's the eye. This is true for all photography, but it's the eye and it's the capturing of it. So you might see it and you don't have the skill to get it, or you might get it by chance, but you don't really see it. It's just in passing. Tony had both. Tony had the eye to see what was unique and what transferred an emotion to a viewer, and he had the skill to capture it. And this is sort of the essence of that. It's the other person that comes to mind is Paul Caponegro and his pictures of ice that he took that are sort of Miro-like almost. And Paul saw, Tony saw. It's the scene that with the skill that makes the difference.
Does indeed. Caroline?
One thing I noticed while I was looking at just now is the scale of it too. I mean, he's made it such that it really is. I mean, they're so much larger than they were in real life, and it changes them in a way that wouldn't happen otherwise if it wasn't captured in a photograph. It really does become a forest. I mean, there's pine trees, and then there's the evergreen trees, and then there's the grass or the lower ferns down below. I mean, it's a beautiful piece, and it's wonderful that we have such a media and people with such an eye and a dedication to actually capture an ephemeral thing like crystals growing on probably, I imagine it's a window of sorts. There's this orange color coming behind, like maybe that's the edge of the window, the wood of the window, which gives a great contrast between that orange and the blues and greens that makes it even more vibrant than it already is. It's a gorgeous piece, and it's wonderful that it is paired with Hideaki Miyamura's pieces that have crystalline glazes on there. So we get all sorts of crystals.
That's so lovely. Bringing together a partnership. Mara?
Well, it's just as if he was a scientist with a microscope. I mean, these ice crystals probably were a very small pattern on the edge of a window, and he went right in there. He figured out how to get the depth of field for the photograph. He figured out how to crop it exactly the way he wanted it cropped. And he figured out how to use the lens to capture the nuance of very tiny structures that are ice and light. And that feeling of ice and light is so present. Yes, there is a tone, there's an orange tone, undertone to this piece, but the dominant is the delicacies of the grays and the transparencies and translucencies of how this ephemeral substance came to be. And then his shift of scale, turns it into a landscape, a magical landscape, a fairy princess landscape. Something magical is in this landscape. It's not every day, and yet it's a very everyday occurrence in the middle of winter in places in the northern climes. But for somehow, I think it's a little fairy kingdom of some sort.
Bruce, your thoughts?
The wonder of it. I love that. And the magic. I can see him just taking his breath away. And he said that his photographs were a momentary stay against confusion. So this takes a confusing, potentially, image, and all his photographs bring that stay against confusion. And I love the analogy with the glazes. He had a canoe called You Come Too, named after a Robert Frost poem. And I can still feel his canoe strokes propelling me forward in that canoe. And he wanted you to come along his journey. So in a way, this is him inviting you into his story as well, like all of his photographs. He wants you to come along for the ride.
Hence, inadvertently, the title of the show, A Singular Journey, into which all of us are invited. And I would close with a quote from Brother Thomas again: "Consciousness of the beautiful will save the world." It is certainly a wish, not a reality, but Tony's work provides us with the opportunity to be aware of that which is beautiful, that which is humble, that which is simply simple, and using that optic on the things around us. There is the opportunity for each one of us to save a small part of this world. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for your patience. As ever, we managed to run over time, but that's not unusual. And just to say what a joy it is to have invited you to share with us on this singular journey.